Welcome everyone. Today is our release party. I'm here with Martin.
Hello.
And Khalid, Rachel.
Hey everybody.
Man, come, make some noise.
Hello, hello, hello.
Release party.
I'm feeling underdressed without the hat. I think
All right.
needed a hat.
Welcome everyone. No matter what channel you're currently watching, either .NET Foundation or our JetBrains TV channel, we would like to introduce you today to our new releases, the 2021.2 release for ReSharper and Rider. I think Martin can put up the slides.
I can put up the slides, yes.
And then we do a quick intro, what's going to happen. Sorry. That's my screen, right? Okay, that's better. And today, during this release party, we're going to show you a bunch of features. I hope you will like what we're going to show. But first things first, as always, if you have any questions, you can ask right away in the chat window from YouTube, and we will try to address them as we go, or at the end, depending on whether it fits or not. We will see. And also, if you have to pause for any reason, feel free to do that. You can continue watching. Also, right afterwards, this will be online right away. So don't worry that you might miss something. And yeah, I hope you have fun. And I would do the hosting for the course of this webinar. And I think we're gonna start with Martin. Is that right?
I think that is right. And I'll just go for the shock effect in one go.
Martin with VS 2022 preview. Let me see. Can I bring up your screen?
Yeah, I was going to go with a shock effect, but now you kind of spoiled the surprise there. But yeah, let's go with it. So as you can see, I'm running ReSharper. It's a preview version in Visual Studio 2022. It's not an official stable release yet. But if you want to give it a try in Visual Studio 2022, you can actually do so. I like living on the edge, so I will be doing a lot of the demos here in ReSharper on VS 2022 and a preview of ReSharper. If you try it, keep in mind it's a preview. And also keep in mind it's an out-of-band release, so it's not yet in Toolbox, it's not yet in the auto-updating mechanism and so on. So I would say bookmark this URL. Keep it handy, and every 30 days, I think you will have to go there and download it again and get an update to keep it working in the latest version of the Visual Studio 2022 preview. So with that, I think I can start showing features because everything you will see. Yeah,
Martin, I'm going to interrupt straight away. It's like, what's so important about VS 2022?
Well, so the interesting thing with VS 2022 is that it's 64 bits. Which means that there's just more memory for Visual Studio to use, but also more memory for ReSharper to use. And actually, let me start my task manager here. You will see I have 3 Visual Studio versions running. Actually, I can only see one. Yeah, there they are. One is very low on memory right now, so that's a nice one. It's swapping out things and not really using a lot of things. But you'll see the more I start using things, the more features I enable in Visual Studio and so on. You will see more memory is required. But because it's 64 bits, there's no real garbage collection involved all the time. And Visual Studio and ReSharper can essentially go wild on your machine, which you may like or may not like, but it's really good.
So finally, all those people with big, beefy machines can make use of the memory that's there.
Yeah, exactly. In Visual Studio 2019, for example, you have 32 bits. So even if you have a 64 gig machine with 24 cores or something like that, those cores can actually be used, but the memory cannot be used by that 32-bit process, and now it can, which is nice.
I think the highest that I've seen was yesterday was someone having 22 gigabyte, I think, of memory usage. Insane.
Yeah, 24 or something, yeah.
It's not a competition. We're not trying to get to use the most as memory.
Well, still, it's nice to have it. Anyway, let's dive in. So the preview has all the features from 2021.2. So regardless if you are using this preview version in VS 2022 or you are making use of the current stable version in VS 2019, it will all work and it will all be very similar. And I hope, because I'm using a preview, that we don't expect or don't see anything that is not expected. So let's start with nullable reference types in Visual Studio and ReSharper. I'm not sure if everyone here has been using them before. Who has? Raise your hand. Well, all of you, except maybe some people who are not watching. So I'll give you a really quick introduction to what they are. So the idea is this is regular C# without nullable reference types. And you can immediately, well, you cannot immediately see the fact that I have a very hidden bug that will only be visible at runtime in this case. I have a string that is null. I'm reversing the string. I was actually really smart in this method to do a null check and return null if nothing is passed in. But then the next thing I'm doing is with that reverse string here, which can be null, I'm calling .length. And at runtime, this will just blow up. You'll get a null reference exception and things will break down. So the idea with nullable reference types is that you can enable them. And once you do so, you will see that ReSharper starts adding suggestions on many things. So for example, this string is not nullable, but we're passing it null, which is wrong. And ReSharper tells us, well, this is not nullable. So you should probably be either suppressing this warning, making sure that we can essentially ignore the fact that this is null going into a non-nullable string, or change the type and make it a string question mark, which is actually a nullable string in this case. I'll go with that, and ReSharper will ask me to update everything that it knows in the path and in that code graph. It will just update all the code. So now all of a sudden, my reverse function takes a nullable string, it returns a nullable string, and you can also see immediately that this thing can actually be null. My sum reverse string can be null, and I have to do something with that. And it essentially, before even running this, ReSharper and the compiler are able to catch whatever exception that I may have there. So I can either check this expression for null, which is nice, or I can add a nullable suppression warning, which is this exclamation mark, essentially saying, look, I know better, compiler, I know better, ReSharper. This, even if it blows up, I'm fine with that. I'm consciously choosing to make this null reference exception that might show up. This is obviously not something that you always want to do. There are cases where you actually want to do this, and you will especially see this happening when you're migrating code bases to nullable reference types. I'm not sure if anyone here has actually tried updating an existing code base to use nullable reference types, but after a while, your entire code base is going to be littered with these exclamation marks, the dammit operator, or whatever it is called. Just essentially suppressing warnings until you figure out what the actual value is and whether it can be null or not. So let's actually show one of the new things, because this was a really quick intro into nullable reference types. If you have a lot of those suppressions in your codes, ReSharper actually lets you find those suppressions and lets you act on them and actually make your code base better by removing those suppressions if they are not needed. So here, I have a method called greetings. It's calling person say hello, person say hello. And my person here is returning a nullable person. Now, I don't really want this because I'm always passing an actual object there. So I can change this one. And first of all, of course, enable nullable annotations in this file. There we go. And then I can make this method return type not nullable, just return an actual person. And you will see all of a sudden by returning an actual person here, that this exclamation mark has become grayed out because we no longer need it. And this is new in ReSharper 2021.2. You can actually ask ReSharper to remove this redundant suppression, and all of a sudden you no longer have that balance or those operators that you actually don't need in codes. Even nicer is that you can also find nullable warning suppressions in your entire code base. So let's find all of them in this solution. I think it's only going to be a couple, but you will see that ReSharper finds them and lets you walk through them and update your code as you go to actually remove the stuff that you added beforehand while you were introducing nullability in your code base. Maybe you already saw it. When I was changing nullability, I used a refactoring. So I did an Alt-Enter and then changed the return type there. You can also do that on anything that you have in your code base. So for example, here I have an add employee methods that adds a person with a role. What I can do is Alt-Enter here and make this nullable. or I can use the refactor this method and say that I want to make this one nullable as well. Or I can just type question mark, Alt Enter, and see that I have a nullability change there, new refactoring in ReSharper. Just enter, and ReSharper will suggest me to update the entire call tree again with whatever accepts that nullable reference. So in this case, quite a number of occurrences. I can click next, and all of a sudden, my list here is now accepting nullable persons. All of these things are also accepting nullable persons. So it's actually a really useful refactoring where ReSharper helps you figure out the entire tree and structure of your code base there. For those of you who have been using ReSharper for a long time, you may know that before there used to be the ReSharper or JetBrains annotations that you could use, where you could annotate methods with can be null, item can be null, not null, etc., to give ReSharper some additional information. Now, of course, with C# having these things on board, you may no longer need them, and maybe you just want to update all of the usages there and make them compiler things. Well, ReSharper now comes with a refactoring where you can say use type annotation syntax, and it will update this one here, for example, to return a nullable person. I can do this. I was
waiting for this for so long, like really.
Yeah,
and it was so tempting converting that by yourself, but it's also really tedious, right? And having the ability to just go through one by one and apply that is really nice.
Yeah, it's actually nicer because, like a lot of the inspections that you see in ReSharper, you can also update this in, for example, the entire solution or just in this file. I'll go with file now, and you'll see that everything gets updated. This not null apparently is no longer needed, so I can also remove that. But now just 2 Alt Enters away, and this entire code, even if it's only a couple of lines, has been updated to use the compiler syntax, which is quite nice.
So you say I can update my whole solution in 2 or 3, 4 keystrokes?
Go for it. Absolutely.
Really nice, really nice.
Also, speaking of those annotations, I kind of showed it here. When you have those that are not needed, you will see them grayed out, so ReSharper can remove them for you. The compiler under the hood in C# is also making use of its own annotation. So you'll see that there's a not null in C# proper as well. Same thing there, ReSharper will also discover that those things exist or do not exist, and I can remove those if I want to. Or if I have one where I have a nullable thingy and I want to specify that this can actually be null, I can update between the shorthand syntax with the question mark or make use of the attributes that are there.
Hey, Martin, I have a question for you. You know, for folks maybe who aren't familiar with nullability, they're seeing you put that processor directive at the top of the file where you enable nullability. But what are some of the other ways folks can kind of opt into nullability in different ways? Because this is at the file level, but are there other ways?
Absolutely good question. So nullability can be enabled for your entire project. Actually, if you go into the project file and you say nullability, I think it's nullability, you can specify enabled. And then all of a sudden, everything in your project will have nullability enabled.
Mm-hmm.
You can also make it disabled, where it will not be enabled for the entire project, and then you can start overriding for every single file. There's a couple of options per file. So imagine if you enable it, maybe you are in a piece of code that you not yet want to introduce nullability to. You can then per file do an override and say, okay, in this one, I want to disable nullability. So there's no context for the compiler to keep track of, but also you don't get those pesky warnings. There's also enable, disable, or restore to essentially revert to the state you were in. Mm-hmm. The nice thing there, by the way, is that you can also do this, for example, per line. So you could enable nullability for the entire file, but then at some point you want to say, okay, look for name here. I want to disable nullability. And then afterwards, enable it again. You can also do that and sort of mix and match on the bits of code where you want to have those things.
Yeah, we actually
has been pointed out. I'll jump in. As been pointed out in the comments there by David, it's nullable, not nullability. There, that's it.
Thanks, David.
The element you want there is nullable.
Yeah,
also, I think we should give a shout out to one of our developers, Andrei Dyatlov, who's been writing a couple of blog posts on that. And I really recommend you to check some of those out, which go very in depth with the whole topic. I think there's also not even just enable, disable, there's also annotations and all that stuff. Every time I forget it, but this is like my go-to source basically for all those questions. And yeah, also because it puts a highlight on the ReSharper and Rider tooling, etc.
They're fantastic blog posts. They're really good blog posts and really well worth checking out.
Absolutely.
So Martin, one last question for you in terms of nullability, and this is kind of like a personal opinion, but like when you're converting to use some of this stuff, obviously ReSharper can help you out, but what's the approach you would recommend for folks getting into nullability?
So it's actually one that I did. So we have another product, server-side product called Space, and for that one, I've been building the SDK since just before nullability was introduced somewhere. So it was originally, well, the initial code was written without nullability in mind, and gradually I started adding nullability there, and you will see that in a lot of places you're just suppressing stuff because you do not yet know what something may be returning or not. So that's really useful to actually start. I really like the fact that we now have that find nullable warning suppressions, so that the first pass you make, you can actually suppress things. But the second pass, you can start removing those suppressions wherever they don't make sense anymore, or where you have more information about the nullability context that is available.
So just take an incremental approach, maybe do it by file, and
actually, I think in this project there's probably a couple of places where they are still disabled, because I know we're not using the latest .NET 6, for example, or .NET 5 even for this one, because we want to be compatible with the long-term service release of .NET. So there are actually a couple of places, especially where we're using system.text.json, which does not yet fully support nullability in that version, where we actually have to disable them to be able to work with those libraries.
Oh, wow. That's a really good edge case then to kind of let people know. That's awesome.
Yeah. Nice side note there, by the way, is that in .NET 6, that's going to be completely no longer the case, because in .NET 6, you will see that I think the goal was to have 100% of all of the framework methods at least covered with nullability annotation. So that's definitely going to be a help there.
Yeah. Let's get to .NET 6. Woo.
Next release party, I guess. Right. Yeah, let's maybe dive into the next topic, unless there's more questions coming in.
No, David Glass said he loves your font ligatures. So yeah, ligatures are awesome.
Sweet. Yes, I told you you should enable them in
yeah. Also, the font is JetBrains Mono. So are you using JetBrains Mono there, or are you using Cascadia?
I am using the default in Visual Studio, so this is not JetBrains Mono.
Yeah,
that's Cascadia. Yeah, we all like JetBrains Mono for no apparent reason. It's
totally unbiased. Yeah.
By the way, does JetBrains Mono also run on .NET Core? That's a stupid joke. I'm sorry.
Bad joke.
Couldn't hold it.
Bad joke. It's not JetBrains.NET Core. Mono. Font. Oh, I'm confused. Carry on, Martin.
All right. Let's maybe dive into source generators. I'm still on the fence whether everyone is going to write their own source generators or not, but in the framework at least, you see a lot of places where Microsoft and other framework authors are using source generators to actually take your existing code and add code to your solution at compile and at design time, so that it gets compiled and essentially takes some of the boilerplate code away. So I'm not going to dive into writing a source generator. I'm just going to see how you can work with code that is being generated in ReSharper here. So what I have is an employee class, very inspirational as an example, I know, where we have a source generator that, using the auto notify attribute here, takes a field in the class and then generates a property with change notification for that one. I know we have a refactoring where you can alt-enter and introduce those things into your code base, but here the idea is define the fields, put auto notify on it, and you will see that all of a sudden you also have a first name and a last name property that you can use in other methods and so on.
I was going to add, I think it's important that I know a lot of C# people probably don't use the partial keyword, but you've actually had to use it here. Like, why are you using the partial keyword in this case?
Oh, really good question. So there's the employee class, which is a partial, like you observed, which has a constructor, sets all the fields, and has a methods. But this first name and last name property have to go somewhere. And this is where the source generator comes into play. What this auto notify attribute will do is tell that source generator to generate everything in the other parts of my employee class. So if I navigate using control-click to this property, for example, we will end up in the generated sources. And you will see that this one is also partial class employee, and adding those things and making use of the different fields that I had in my original class.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a good example, the fact that source generators are additive, but they can't do like call site replacement, right? So we have to use these techniques and
exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people were confused at the beginning, especially at the beginning with source generators, that it would be something that could take your code and rewrite it. That's not the case. They only add stuff to your projects, but they do not replace things. There's a couple of techniques that you can use. I would again point to Andre's blog posts and presentation, because he's doing some crazy things with source generators. But that would take us too far, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. That's a great clarification. Thank you.
All right. While we are in generated source, so thank you for making the bridge there. By the way, if you want to find out what generator is emitting which code, you can actually go into Visual Studio's dependencies here, go into analyzers, find generators, or find the source generator that you added. And then you can see that, for example, the auto notify property generator added the attribute itself, added my partial employee, and added a person view model as well, as examples in this bit of code. Cool. Back to the generated source. You may have noticed that we now have proper syntax highlighting in a generated source, but also proper navigation and so on. So if we want to navigate back to our human written code, I'll just call it that, you can actually control-click there or use the navigation shortcuts. What's also nice is that you get errors, or you can see whenever you have an error in there. If I change this one to first name X, for example, you will see that I have some errors of the code that is being generated. But also, while I'm making that change, let's try to do this quickly. I'm too slow to actually make it happen. Anyway, if the source generator would have an error or would emit something that is wrong, it would actually also show the errors. I'm not going to update the actual source generator to make it emit something that is wrong, but you get the idea. You will see errors in the generated code as well. Actually, I think I can do a quick one. If I remove that partial there, you will see that I now get errors because it's no longer part of the same employee class. Cool. Let's undo that one, and let's go with the one that really blows my mind. Let's do a refactoring inside of the generated code. So again, I have an employee with a first name property and a last name, or first name and a last name fields that generates a property. If I go into the generated code, I can actually take that. Let's take the last name property here and invoke the rename refactoring and make this, for example, just name instead of last name. If I update this one in my generated code, ReSharper is going to recognize that the last name property in the generated code came from the last name field in my human written code. We'll update it, and we'll then re-invoke the source generator to update everything to be name and the name field and all, which I think blows my mind. You no longer have to find the generated code and then go back to the original class where you rename this thing and then invoke everything again. You just do it from within the generated code, and ReSharper will figure it out and figure out what the flow is to actually generate those things. You're all so silent now. It has blown your mind.
Yeah, we're broken now. This is
that one is very cool.
Yeah, you know, it's one of ReSharper's strengths for me has always been kind of diving into code and seeing things that maybe folks don't want you to see. And I think this is kind of amazing that even in stuff that maybe you should kind of ignore or not look into, if you find yourself there, we still give you options to fix your code. So that it is kind of amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. I think originally when we estimated this segment of the release party, I said something like 12 minutes. We're at 26 minutes. So.
Maybe we should have just had a nullable reference type source generators release party.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's maybe cover a couple of the quick fixes and new inspections that are there. I know a lot of people, when you write, especially when you're doing something that is more low level, where you have to swap elements in an array, for example, there's a new inspection that will tell you that you can also swap this using deconstruction, and ReSharper will rewrite it to essentially have two pairs of tuples and change those things. There's use empty inspections as well. Very often you want to start with an empty string array, for example. That's good, but if you have lots of those, you will be allocating many empty string arrays. Instead, what you can do is use array.empty_string, which will give you back the exact same array continuously throughout the lifetime of your code base. Hence, you will have fewer allocations, which will be better for your code base. So we added inspections for many of those occurrences where such types exist in .NET. Even with event arguments, I think there's an empty one there as well, so you can just alt-enter and update those as you go. Cool. Maybe one more while we are in ReSharper, and also because I want to make a bridge to what Rachel is going to show, because we're all prepared and all that. So let's make that bridge. Is that if you have a web application, I think Rachel is going to tell you more about this. If you have a web application and you are making use of the HTTP client and any methods that request something from that web application in your code base, you will now also get completion of all of the endpoints that are available in your code base. So for example, I can call get random meal from my other project and get completion of that inside of a string. Even better, there's also navigation, so you can see if I hold the control key or I make use of the navigate shortcut, I can actually go there and dive directly into this get random meal API from the other project, which is kind of cool. But as I mentioned, I'll leave it to Rachel to dive into the details of this one.
No more typos with these, right?
Yeah.
Magic strings.
Yeah, Martin said it already. Rachel's next with ASP.NET Core endpoints.
Endpoints.
Which I know nothing about, but I'm eager to learn.
Oh, good. These are easy anyway. So yes, the thing that everybody does, this is so handy. So we all have to work with APIs, or almost all of us. If you're on the web, you're definitely working with an API, but even a lot of client apps. So what do you do to, kind of get a nice overview of what do you have and what can you call and managing them and calling them and all of that? Well, that's where we have the endpoints window. So you could go to View, Tool Windows, and then Endpoints, and it'll pop up your Endpoints window. And what Rider does is it scans through looking for certain types of patterns in the code to find endpoints for us. Specifically, it looks at some of the attributes and things like that. So this is really, really handy. And I mount multiple projects in this solution. So of course, they're going to be in my API. If I pick the other ones, no endpoints. That's okay. I would expect them to be in the API. But the really cool stuff I could do here is not just by sorting them and managing how they look. I could do that, right? I could group them or view them a little differently, but I can actually click on one of these and I can take a look at some information about them. I get this little documentation tab, the HTTP client tab, and the Open API tab. So this is kind of cool. I could bounce through here and see, oh, what's all the metadata about this particular endpoint. If I want to go and investigate in the code, I can just right click on it and do a find usages. Oh, this is the best too. It's searching, takes it a minute sometimes, boom. Here it found all of the calls to that endpoint that is within my project. Now this is like the handiest thing ever. It's like sliced bread, better than sliced bread. So I'm still not sure why we use sliced bread as any kind of measuring You know, like why are things better than that? But
Are you trying
when
to
we
tell me
sent
sliced
somebody
bread
to the
isn't good?
moon, I mean, it's
Really?
good, but we sent somebody to the moon. Can't we measure, you know, that? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I just double click on any of these, boom. It's right here, right in your editor. So this is like the super handiest navigation ever. I love this. Endpoint. I can just live in the endpoints window. It's so fun. If I need to do stuff like YAML, because everybody likes YAML, right? Right?
Yes.
Sure,
I
of
love
course they
YAML
do.
so much.
Everybody
YAML
loves
is
it.
awful.
So great.
It is awful,
Don't
isn't
get
it?
me started. It's supposed to be a party.
Oh, right. Yeah, we're supposed to be upbeat here. Yay, YAML is awesome. So here I can actually come in, select any ones that I want. I just grab them all here with the Control A. Go to my Open API tab, and if I click this little save icon, I could export this to YAML. So you don't have to worry about handcrafting it because that actually would really suck. But here it just makes me a nice little YAML file that I can then save. And if I wanted to, this is not my actual URL, but I can change this really quick for testing. And give it a little refresh up in here. And there we go. So now it's changed it. I could come in here and you can see it does a little swagger thing. A little bit of a scroll there. Click execute and goes through, actually calls the API. Now you do have to have that running, and I did have this running before I started here, but so you do have to have something running. But you can do this with not just endpoints in your project, but endpoint repositories and other locations for endpoints. So here I get a whole bunch of my little categories for this meal planning app. And here I did not have to write a whole bunch of YAML, which is, I'm all about not having to write a whole bunch of YAML. I think most of us are. JSON's fine. YAML just for some reason just doesn't seem to quite work the same way. But here I can just save it. I could go and manage a lot of things in here. I could also run right out of here as well. If I go back to this little HTTP client tab, the same thing, I may need to modify this a little bit. And then once I do that, I could just click run. So you notice this is kind of a theme in Rider. I could click run on anywhere I see these little arrows, and I think I typed in the wrong address there. And wherever I do, it will submit a request, and then I may get something back, right? Depending on what it is.
You just forgot the S on the HTTPS part.
No, that's what it was. Well, yeah, so I did type it in wrong as usual, right? There we go. So now I can see the results in here. It's really good. I love this. This is really nice web tooling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's cool too is sometimes with Open API specs, and especially the Endpoints tool, you can kind of share those Open API YAML files even in a non-web scenario, like in a console application.
Right.
So yeah, the Endpoints tool will just light up if it finds a Open API YAML file in your project, and it will find those endpoints, which is, it's one of my new favorite features. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, this is totally great. So also, if you just noticed these little like Open API icons in the gutter, if I click on them, it will open an HTTP file, which is Rider's HTTP client. And then the same thing from here, it's an alternative way to be able to run these. All right, so I could just run them in a slightly different tool window, right? But it all ends up being the same kind of stuff. But I like to have an HTTP file around with a bunch of little endpoints defined in it. And you can even add more to this, like your body or request headers, things like that, and send the data over and get some data back and stuff like that. So quite nice. And yes, again, I would need to change these. In this case, I picked the wrong one, but really nice management tools here. So
Rachel, I was actually wondering, because you have the endpoints tool window at the bottom, but if you are in the Open API document itself inside of the YAML codes, can you also navigate to your API from the YAML?
To the Open API from the YAML, maybe?
So imagine going to one of the APIs that are defined in there. I've no idea. Just asking.
Oh, do you mean something like this, or
No,
do you mean
control
going right to
click
the
on
code?
API/course or something. Again, I have no idea if it works, but just wondering.
Wait, I didn't hear what you said there.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
if I
there.
did-
Yeah. So control click on that one.
Oh, the control click. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, so here I get a little bit of extra. There's always something popping up in Rider for us, right? So here I can actually see this URL path segment and where some of this is and some calls to it as well. So that's kind of cool. So if I
That is
do
nice.
maybe the post, then it'll take me to at least one of the calls to it. Yeah, you do. I forgot about the control clicks right out of here too. There's so much stuff. But I could go right to the calling code from that. And then from there, of course, you can go right to the endpoints right out of the calling code. Right, so the same thing, a control click. So there's really nice navigation between these tools and the editor.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I had to talk about was actually to switch over to Visual Studio. I know we're having like so much fun in
Right.
Rider. Now we'll go over to Visual Studio, but that's because we have some of the attributes for routing in ReSharper. For example, like a refactoring. If I come in here and I have a action result and I just go to do a refactoring and I want to rename it, here I could do my Alt-Enter and it'll apply rename factoring. But you might expect it just to do it in the method. Sure, it does, but it also picks it up in those attributes and anywhere else that might be used. There's also structural navigation. So if my cursor lands before a double quote, then I can use the tab and do tab, and you can see it's selecting little bits. Here I'm structurally going through that action, and then the actual word tag in it, and then the next whole block, and then the word tag in it, and then structurally navigating through the actual method as well. So that's some of the newer things in the last release that we've had. That's also very nice. If you're, again, working in the web, you're working with endpoints, this is where you live and breathe all day. So between endpoints, and this works, ReSharper, it works in Rider just the same. So if you have Rider, then you're doing endpoints. You get to come here and structurally navigate through the nice different ways of doing it with the Rider or ReSharper to go through your endpoints, navigate back and forth, do all this cool stuff that you need to do every day since we're living in there. So I think that was all that I had. Just showing a little bit of Rider and ReSharper endpoints and attributes on the routes, things like that. So who is next?
Well, we actually have a question. Sorbond asked, what kind of endpoints actually get discovered? And he's asking specifically about gRPC. Does anybody have any ideas about whether we'll support gRPC endpoints in the endpoints window?
I didn't hear anything about it, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to do it. So for right now, it's just these kind of regular REST endpoints or other stuff that has attributes on it, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But gRPC is becoming pretty popular, right? So
I think this is also a
Anyone
great
else?
moment to plug our public issue tracker, where you can just do feature requests and then have other people vote on it and add comments and things like that. So that's utrack.jetbrains.com.
Yeah. Now, I've talked to the folks working on the endpoints, and there's going to be a lot of work, especially when we start getting into .NET 6 with minimal APIs and stuff like that. So there will be the limitation that Rider always works on the code that you write. So if you have any kind of dynamic routes being generated at runtime, those are probably going to be a little bit more difficult to discover. But there's always going to be the workaround of, if you generate your open API specs and put them on disk, the endpoints tool will find those endpoints. So that's always an option as well. So, yeah.
All right. I think next up is debugging again with Rachel. Rachel, but if you need a moment, then we can also take Matt first.
No, that's fine.
So Blazor
Blazor debugging. So there's a couple things I could do to show for debugging. So debugging, of course, we know that Rider has some really great debugging tools. If Rider will stop. So launch Rider while you stop another running instance of Rider. There we go. So a pretty common setup is you might have, client. Here I have like a client app, a shared library. This is Blazor, a shared library, and an API. And until we had the Blazor debugging, you could step through the API like you would expect, like regular old debugging, all of your, step in, step out, run to breakpoint, etc. You get all the goodies in there. But then when it came to the client, you would have to go into dev tools and do a lot of work in the dev tools. But now we don't need to do that so much because we have Blazor client-side debugging. So I could come to any page that I want, and here I have a mix of both Razor.Razor pages for Blazor and also Razor.cs as well. So depending on how you model your apps, you might have just .razor or .razor.cs or a little mix of both. For some of the smaller pages that are just utilities, I don't have the I tend to call it a code behind. I know it's not a code behind, but that associated Razor page. So I could come in and put a breakpoint in here, basically anywhere. Not a lot of code in this one, but that's okay. I just hit F9. There I have myself a breakpoint. And you'd probably expect this would be the first thing you would think that it can do. But also, if I come into the .razor page, wherever there is some code, right, that's not just HTML, you can put a breakpoint there as well. And then in addition, I could put breakpoints on the back end too. So, I could step through the API and the front end. So I could put them anywhere. It really just does not matter. Now, before I run off to run this, if we're going to start debugging and we have to work with the runtime versions of these apps, what I want to do is make sure that I have a particular edit configuration or something that can do this. I just have a compound configuration that I set up. And this is not a new feature. We've been able to do this in Rider for a while, but you'll want to have this. A compound configuration that runs your API, then runs your app. It makes things a lot simpler. Later, there's going to be some multiple startup projects and things like that, but this works just fine. It launches your API, then launches the app. Alternatively, you could launch the API yourself in debugger run mode and then launch the app yourself. I find it easier just to say, have this little run all and then have it run them both at once. So I could do that with debugging as well. So when I do debugging, the same thing in that edit configurations, I get to choose if I want a browser to launch. So as soon as this does launch, then I could go back in there and show this. Of course, it does have to load up a lot of stuff to be able to launch debugging, and it has to launch the actual app itself. And I think I have mine set to Chrome, so it should pop up a whole separate window. And I just made it do a whole bunch of work here. So it's taking a second or so. But we could see it had to go through the build, did some things. You'd see it starting to talk to Chrome here. Here we go. So that first time, if you haven't debugged in a while, might take a bit. And here we go. It actually hit a breakpoint already and right here. Right, so I could keep running. Actually, let's click over to debug. It's still doing a few things. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now where did I thought that hit the breakpoint. It actually didn't hit the breakpoint. What I wanted to do is in a list of meals for a meal planning app. If I click here, it gives me that little nothing to see while it goes off and does some Blazor-y things. And I'm getting a different error here. Let's try it.
I think this is the curse of screen sharing because you can you can see it processing the assemblies in Rider in the background. It's just because your screen sharing is just taking a while.
Yeah, I think it's just the lag with it taking up all the resources from the screen sharing. Then what happens is sometimes it'll launch And sometimes like this just the way that Blazor loads, right? Sometimes it's loading up some things before it loads other things. Oh, I have to click on it a couple times. Oh, there we go. I think it actually did. Yeah, here we go. It actually did. So it did finally load stuff up. Yeah, so the curse of screen sharing and lag from, not having the best laptop on the planet. So when I click on meals, and it goes to this little meals list, just to list all the goodies that we're going to eat. Here, I just put a breakpoint in here where I'm calling the service to tell me to get everything that I need. I just have this breakpoint, and here it is on the client. So I can actually come in here and use all the same debugging tools. I had some in here before from a previous debugging session. I can actually see what they are. I could run, I could step through, I could do all that stuff. If I do a resume, it'll keep going, and it should hit any other breakpoints. And I do have some random breakpoints in here, so who knows what else might pop up. But here in the actual .razor file itself, right? So there's some HTML here, and then I have my Razor code, which is CSharp. And here's where it's determining if, there was a picture associated with this particular meal. If not, then it's just throwing out a little default one. So here I might want to step through this or see what's available here. And the same thing, you'll see the local variables. I can see all of the information, right, about that entity that I just brought down. I can step through and do all these cool little things that you would use in the debugger every day, right? So you get the full stack here with all the, whatever shortcut keys and key maps you have would work just fine, right? I could walk through, I could keep running, et cetera, et cetera. And you notice if it walks through, it does find the end, right? It can't walk through HTML. That's not a thing that it does. And then here I could keep running, and it goes through each meal in the list in this case. Right, so I could keep going and going. And
if you can debug HTML, does that mean HTML is a programming language?
Oh no! Are we going to have this? Are we going to have this chat again? So,
Matt,
we should.
Don't start it, Matt. Don't.
It's too late. Matt's out of the bag. So
yeah. The comments are going to go wild now.
Audience, vote. Is HTML a programming language or not? Let's hear you all in the comments.
I do apologize.
Yeah, I totally want to derail the whole party. Is HTML a programming language or not? So regardless, we need it. And here's a great way to debug stuff that's interspersed with HTML, right? Razor code. So this is great. Like, it's seamless. It's the same debugging tools, but now also on the client with Blazor. So that's pretty awesome. I really love how you can just shove a breakpoint in here, right next to some HTML, and you could still use your browser tools, right? They're just fine. But here I could just come in here and use everything right inside of Rider. So that's just absolutely wonderful. I love this. So web development is super fantastic now with these, between endpoints and this, I'm very happy. So. Okay, so that's what I have then, and I think now we go to another person for other cool stuff.
It's me. I'm going to try not to make any more kind of bad comments about HTML and stuff, but I'm still going to talk about debugging, and I'm just going to show a couple of teeny tiny features which are really nice, little sort of quality of life things for debugging. I've got a little demo program here which is boring. It creates an instance of a class and calls a method. What's interesting is I've got a property here which is going to throw an exception. And if I start debugging this, then the obvious thing is going to happen when I try and look at the property in the debugger, then we get an exception thrown here. And every time I make I step, if I go into like another method and so on, I can then see this exception thrown every single time, and it's really annoying because we're just going to keep on getting lots of exceptions, and every time you evaluate things, we see error messages. With Rider, we can now, I've done this because I've just run my demo. With Rider, you can now right-click on it and disable the evaluation of the item there, which means that now it won't evaluate that as you step along. So it's a nice way of just being able to say, I don't care that this is going to give me an error, ignore it, ignore the errors, and so on. We can click refresh to show it and see what's going to happen, or we can right-click then and enable it back in again. The nice thing about this, though, is that Rider will do it automatically for you. So if it tries to evaluate a property or something too many times and it will throws too many errors, it will automatically disable evaluation for you. So that's a nice, cute thing, which is very sort of helpful to try and get rid of some of the noise. Second thing I want to show you is the debugger gives us a lot of information, and it can give us a bunch of information that we don't necessarily have at compile time. So here I've got a list of strings, and we know that it's a concrete list because I'm creating it right there. I'm passing it to this method do something, but then do something pulls this in as an IEnumerable. When I'm using this in source code, I don't know what kind of IEnumerable that is. I don't know anything about it. But if I sort of step into it, obviously I can look at the debugger, and the debugger tells me it's a list of string. But there's a little bit more than that. I can sort of right-click on it, and I've got two items here, jump to source and jump to type source. Jumping to source, I'm in the locals window here, by the way, just to be clear. I'm right-clicking on names in the locals window. Jump to source will take me up to the parameter. And if I go and do jump to type source, it knows it's a list, and the debugger knows that this particular type instance is a list and can navigate me straight there. So two sort of really nice little items there, which are useful for debugging. And the other thing I wanted to show then is we've made a few changes to the exception settings we've got in the debugger as well. So we've got the debugger item here, and we've got some options here about what we do when there are unhandled exceptions. We've traditionally had this break on unhandled exceptions. You tend to want that on because normally if you get an unhandled exception, your application will crash. So it's usually a good idea for the debugger to tell you about it. We've expanded this one, break on user unhandled exceptions, where we can ignore certain exceptions as well. So if we want to hear about various exceptions, that's great. But if there's things like operation cancelled exception or task cancelled exception, they're just noise. A lot of the time there, you've probably got a better exception which is being thrown, and so we can ignore those as well. So it's just, again, a slight bit of quality of life then to clear things up. So that's really it for debugging, and unless anybody has any sort of quick questions, I'll move on to another topic. Anyone?
Well, I just noticed the ordering of your list of names. I'm furthest away from you, Matt. I thought we were friends.
It's alphabetical.
Oh, okay.
It's really not alphabetical. It's just
it's alphabetical. HTML is a programming language, and this is alphabetical.
How dare you? We went from
I'm trying to cause
to
trouble.
Fight Club. It's okay. It's fine.
I'm sorry. What can I say? Let me see. Can I move it up? There you go. Look at that.
Okay. I feel better.
And look, see, that's the kind of pro I am. I use the rearrange code keyboard shortcut to move things around. With keeping the. I mean, look at that. The comma's correct. Look at that.
Wow, it's just amazing.
Yeah. So you see, I deliberately put them in the wrong order so that you would pick up on that, so that I could demo just that feature. And now I'm going to move on.
Thanks, everybody.
Oops. I appear to have just managed to close Rider. So let's fire that up again. Okay, so I was going to move on, and I was going to talk a bit about some of the game dev stuff we've been working on. We've got a couple of things to show around that. This is work we do with Unity and also Unreal. And I'm actually running the preview version of Rider for Unreal Engine, and I'll come back to that in a sec. I'm going to start and have a quick look at Unity stuff. Let me just load up the solution. Before I click go, the thing that I want to show you is actually part of the loading. It's not been a very big release for Unity features here, but there's been a number of things happening under the covers. There's some performance stuff going on. One of the things that I really like, it's a small piece, but again, quality of life type stuff, is that when we load up a Unity project, we load up your source code, obviously. That tends to live in the assets folder. We've also got a packages folder, which we show in the solution view. And normally, previously, that has waited until the entire project was loaded, and then we'd show the project. Now we show it immediately. So if I load that up, we should get the solution window open any second, and we should get package shown straight away. Come on, you can do it. This is why I didn't want to close the app. Look at it redrawing the windows there. Screen sharing is great. So there we go. So it's just a nice little thing there. It's that whole sort of attention to sort of performance type things. We want to try and get you to your code and to get you to the files that you need straight away there. See, we're in packages here. It's opened it up. It's remembered where I was there, whereas previously that was automatically closed. So it's a small thing, but a nice thing. Now, you might have noticed I'd have Unity open in the background. And if you have a look, now is not the time to be installing new versions of IntelliJ. See, Toolbox is a fantastic application, and you can install lots of things side by side. But sometimes when you have nightly builds, they can get pushed out in the middle of a presentation. And yeah, timing's everything. So I have my sample app of Unity here, and you can see there's a little asterisk there by the main menu. I don't know if you can see that, because I've created a new game object. Let's create another one here. Create game object, and there we go. So I've got unsaved changes in my application here. And now I'll switch back to Rider. I write some code and everything. I want to commit something in, go to the commit window. I've got some files saved in Git ready to go. I can do, bid something great. And then one of the things that we've added for this release, which is really nice, is this item down here, check unsaved Unity scenes. We've got a connection to the Unity editor. And so one of the things we can do is quite simply ask the editor, do you have any unsaved scenes? And we can do that. We can check, and we'll warn it. We'll warn you now. So that's a very useful way to make sure that you've got all the files saved before you're ready to commit there. Simple one. You can commit anyway, or you can cancel and come back and save. Another little feature we've got is we've done some work with the Quick Doc tooltips. So you might well be familiar with, there we go, the quick documentation tooltips we've got. It shows you the a little summary from the API that there is there. And also we've got this link down here, external documentation for update. If we click that, then, oh la la, lots of different windows. Let me just, wow, zoom, zoom, zoom. So yeah, so if we click that, we then get our documentation for mono behavior updates. If we do the same for starts, we'd get that. But what we can do now is this time we've made some updates, much needed updates really, and you can use the context help keyboard shortcut action there with the keyboard shortcut, and that will just take you straight to the page that you want there. You can see the window opening in the background there. So a very simple thing, keyboard shortcut to jump around and get you to the external documentation. A couple of other things to add for Unity, which are nice. Again, talk about debugging, a few debugging improvements there. So if you are using a local player, which is a UWP, whatever UWP stands for these days, Unified Windows Process or something, I can't remember. But the new model of Windows processes, the Windows 10 style Windows processes, if you are doing local debugging of those, we now support that directly in the editor. If you try to connect to one of those, we'll configure everything so that the networking works correctly and debugging works appropriately. We've also made debugging a lot smoother for players which are based on IL to CPP, where Unity rewrite your .NET intermediate language into C++ and recompile it. So we've got sort of fewer exceptions happening there, and you get a much smoother experience working with that. So these are exceptions thrown by Unity itself. We kind of handle those cleaner and nicer for you, and you can enable those again if you want to and still need them. And finally, with debugging, a recent change in Unity means that the exit GUI exception is always thrown a lot, and we've suppressed that as well, so you don't fail on that.
Matt,
So,
very important question.
Yes.
So, someone said, why does it say Rider for Unreal if you're showing Unity?
That was also perfect timing, because I'm just moving into Rider for Unreal. So we have got Unreal support for in Rider as well, but it's a preview. So we've got an actual different build in much the same way we're doing with the ReSharper for Visual Studio 2022. We've got a separate download and a separate install to work with Rider for Unreal. So traditionally, we've had ReSharper C++. We've had that for many years now, and we've been wanting to build that and pull that into Rider. We've had Rider as a game dev environment for Unity. We're now extending that to be a game dev environment also for Unreal. And this has been in preview now for well over a year, possibly longer. and we're working on it. We're working on making sure that the C++ engine works really well with Unreal, which is a big use case for C++ analysis. And we have a separate preview for that. So you can download that now. You can join the preview. You can download that. The version I'm showing you here is the 2021.2 preview. It's based on the released version of 2021.2. So it's got the Unity stuff there, as well as the Unreal stuff. But it's got a whole lot of Unreal things in there. And the first thing is quite blatantly staring us in the face. I'm on a Mac, and traditionally Unreal development is on Windows, but we've supported Unreal on Mac now. So we can actually build and work with projects running on a Mac. And normally what would happen here is you generate a solution file, Visual Studio solution file, and Visual C++ project files. We can load the U project files directly. So we don't actually need to have solution files and project files anymore. We just use the existing U project files there and the build.cs files and so on. And we can load those up, read those directly, and build a project model off the back of that. And so we can see here now we're just loading up a U project directly. We can see that we've got sort of projects listed there, and if I click on that, it takes me to the build.cs file, which describes that particular project, which is cool. And we get all the normal sort of features you'd expect from C++ and Unreal support in there. Inspections, syntax highlighting, quick fixes, navigation, refactorings, Alt-Enter, all that kind of stuff there, testing and so on. And we've also got the cool Unreal features that are in there as well. We will do things like we'll run Unreal header tool on your files as you type, and it'll pull out those, and it'll give you sort of warnings about these U-class macros and so on. And yeah, it now works with Unreal on Mac, which is pretty cool. So a few other improvements that have happened in this release as well is debugging works with, improvements around debugging. So with some of the NAT Viz visualizations of various types, we've got a lot more sophisticated in how we handle those, and they work a whole lot better. And we've also understand the Unreal code style, and so we will configure ReSharper C++, it's the ReSharper C++ engine underneath all of this. We will configure that to work with the standards that Unreal have as well. And the other thing which is very useful for, we've got a lot of good feedback for, is we've got a plugin called Easy Args, which is really nice there. It just adds a little combo box to your tool window here, and you can add extra command line arguments to the run configuration that is kicked off when you want to try and build your editor, when you want to run your game, run your editor, and so on. So yeah, I think that's everything I really want to show with game dev. Again, if anybody has any questions, they can jump in now, or I'll have a look in the comments and see. And if not, I'm going to hand over to the next.
Definitely. By the way, just before you started, someone pointed out that they like the Unity support really much. And folks, if you have anything that you see here or in the course of the remaining, just let us know if you love it. That would be great. And I think next one is Khalid with FSharp. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, like a couple of weeks. Yeah. Can you folks hear me? You can hear me, right?
We can hear and see you. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. Let me close everything and then bring up. So a couple of weeks ago, I really spent a long time learning FSharp and building things and living the DevRel lifestyle. One of the things we constantly have to do when we write blog posts is take that first frame out of a GIF. So I actually ended up writing an FSharp utility called freeze frame in FSharp. And I guess what I found personally is the FSharp experience in Rider is pretty awesome. And with this particular release, there are some quality of life improvements specifically for FSharp developers. A lot of things like actions. One of the first things too is you can optimize some of your open statements at the top of the file. So as you can see here, some of the first three here are grayed out because I'm not actually using them in my application. So I can hit the Control Option O. Let's see. and it actually removes all of the unused open statements in my application. Matt actually showed how you can move items up and down in terms of scope. So here I have a type of shape, and I can actually reorder these things, which is really nice. Not only that, you can move things up and down. You can actually move things left and right. So let's go ahead and try to do that. Sometimes the commands are a little tough to pull off. Oh, wrong one. Oh, wrong one again. I have caps locks on. So yeah. So you can see I moved the width over and then I moved it back over. So scopes, FSharp's helper like shortcut actually understands the format. Here we can move this over again. So length now is in front of width, which is pretty cool. This also works in terms of parameters into, say, like up here I have a constructor. This will break my code, but you can also see how it kind of moves things around. So I'll move this character over where the string was, and you can see you can just kind of move things, which is kind of pretty awesome. You can see all the crazy shortcuts here on the screen. Another nice thing as well that C# developers have that F# developers are going to get in this current release is postfix prefixes. So here I've defined a tuple of 1 and 2. I know it's not really that exciting, but if I go ahead and I type .let, I can go ahead and press enter. Oops, sorry. Let me delete this comment. Try that again. You'll see that we actually declared, a variable for you, and now you can just use it, which is really nice. Another thing we can do is we can actually deconstruct these types. Up here, I have this, horrible definition of a shape that no one can even imagine. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sizes, sides and different lengths, but you can actually pass it in as that type, or you can actually run our command here and deconstruct it into its tuple. And you can see now we have F1, 2, 3, and 4. So those are some of the nice additions we've added to F# and the F# experience in Rider, specifically around postfix prefixes, where we like expand into a variable. We're looking to add more of those as the F# experience gets better. So if you work in C# and you're used to other postfix templates, you should expect to see more kind of show up in F#. So yeah, those are the improvements in the F# experience for folks using F# and Rider together. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Khalid. That's really cool. I'm always excited seeing postfix template. It's one of my favorite features. Mm-hmm. Rachel is next, I think, with code cleanups. Rachel, you ready? Still muted? Let's wait for it. Yeah, still muted, but the screen is there already.
Oh, there we go. Lost the mouse for a minute, had to unmute. So code cleanup. Of course, this is something that's been in Rider for a while, but now we've made a few changes to make it a little bit easier. So one of these is if I just want to run the cleanup, we have more of a consolidated user interface where the dialog was kind of split up. So I might take some code. In this case, I'll just select the entire file and I'll do a Control E and C. You can also use like Shift or go through the menu if you like. And I get the reformat and cleanup code. So here's where things have been consolidated into this nice dialog here. So obviously I get my scope selection and it realizes that I had selected some text. I could also have just left it at the file, but also you get uncommitted files or changes uncommitted or custom scope, right? So you could pick out what you want here. And then your profile, which is full cleanup or just the reformat and apply syntax style or reformat code. And if you look at these options that are showing up in here, these are the same options that you can set if you go into File and Settings, and you get all the cleanup, the renaming, refactoring, a lot of those different settings. They're all in here, right? So you can see them and just look at them here and see how you want to optimize or how it's going to be optimized, and you can reset them in the settings. Once I do this, well, let's go back to the code and just take a look at what it looked like really quick, and then come back in here. So some things that are set in my settings. One of them is var instead of the type, right? There's a nice new little shortcut. And notice if you do an Alt-Enter, it also suggests that, right? So that was one of these suggestions as per my settings. And then also another one as part of the code cleanup settings, if I go into File and Settings, would be the if statement. This is a classic if expression, brackets, and then just one line of code, else brackets, one line of code. Well, if there's more than one line of code in here, then I might want those brackets, but if not, I could compact this if then, make it a little bit more readable. Now, I could do that with the classic Alt-Enter and go into, format or cleanup selection, or I could use the nice consolidated dialog. So you do have your choice, and I'll do the whole file, and we'll go back in there and look again. So I'll do my Control-EC and my selected text, so full cleanup. And if I look here right in the beginning, oh yes, the var style. And if I move down a little bit, you'll see some stuff about the braces and some of those other rules that I had set in the settings. So once I say okay to that, it goes through and does the cleanup, and it takes it a second or two. It has to actually scan the code and make some changes. Also, the namespaces, if you noticed, I didn't point it out, but I had a couple extra unused namespaces. That's always very annoying, right? Because you have those and you never get around to going and taking them out or doing an Alt-Enter and telling it to. Well, here it just does it for you. But if I take a look back here now, oh, nice and compact, right? I didn't, it doesn't, actually it's more readable without the brackets in this case. It makes it a little bit easier because it is one line. Or here, all right, it cleaned up that var for me. So all of that stuff, as per my settings, it just did a nice cleanup. So that's really great, all consolidated into one window. Additionally, so I just cleaned it up here, but maybe I don't want to, run this at this time or by myself. Maybe I just want to make it a little more automatic. What I could do is pick out whatever files I want, and I could come in here in my commit window when I'm going to commit. Say I didn't even run it, or I just got lazy and I ran it in half of the files to do a code cleanup, and then I got tired. So I could come in here and say, hey, look, I want to clean up when I check in, right? When I do my commit. Right? Also, I could do things like I usually have the check to do checked off as well, because then it'll give you a little to-do list, any to-do comments that you had. It goes through and it looks. Also, some other things you could do before the commit, but this integrates with that cleanup, right? It's the same cleanup. So if I have that checked, we're good. All right, do my commit message. Probably want a better commit message that actually says something. And I do the commit, and you can see the inspect code runs. It goes through, it's running them, it's cleaning up the code. And after it does the commit, then I'll be able to see some of these commit logs with the differences and the cleanups. So it's just the fact that it's going to take a while because I selected a whole bunch of files there, but it will go through, clean them up, do what it has to do. All right, so quite nice. I don't think I want to wait for the whole thing, so I'll just click cancel on that. But it works quite nicely. So also, if I clean up my code now, then the next time I do the demo, I won't have any code to clean up. There to pick out some of the cleanup code in here as well. And I had this cleaned up before. So really nice. You can do that right on the commit if you don't feel like doing it at any other particular time. So new feature is that consolidated cleanup and cleanup in the commit. So who's next?
I actually have the question, Rachel.
Yeah.
Tabs or spaces?
I don't care. I know nobody ever says that, do they? I'm like, whatever the team that I have to work on does, right? Whatever they want, I'm cool.
We're going to ask for answers in the comments now.
We
Just,
can tabs
really-
or spaces. This
yeah.
does cause like serious fights. I'm like, people, it still works. It's still code. Actually, does it matter? Like if you have an IDE like Rider, it doesn't actually matter, does it? Because it works with both. It does everything you need. It does, and it's all configurable, and you can share your settings with your team. So it doesn't actually matter, does it?
The best argument I heard was about visually impaired people, and particularly if you know someone on the team might have that, then tabs are actually better. And I know that because of, what's his name, Brad Wilson, I think, from the XUnit project. So yeah, that's something to consider maybe.
So if you're pairing with somebody and they demand one or the other?
No, I think the idea is that if you have a visual impairment, you can actually set the tab width and automatically jump farther, so that it becomes more clean that you're actually in.
That makes sense for accessibility. Sure. But then, like for me, then again, it comes down to it doesn't matter for me. But yeah, if you have an actual accessible need, that's a little different.
Yeah. All right, I think I'm next, and this is a very special moment for me. For one reason, today is the day I'm going to show my good friend Rodney also a couple of Xamarin things. Hi, Rodney. But I will be pretty quick because I have no idea about Xamarin. But some parts Rider makes really cool. So first is we have some editors for the assets, Xcode assets basically. So you will have, you will see those for color. So you have a color picker for icons and also for images. And most importantly, for app icons and images, you can also drag and drop. And I planned this really well because I'm dropping, oh no, that was the wrong one. Let me see. That should be PDF the first. But the second one will work. And this is Dave. Dave will be very soon. I merged this in really nicely. Dave will also have a webinar really soon next week, I think, with us about static. So make sure to check that out. The second thing I want to show you is, and Android or Xamarin developers probably already know about this. Yeah, you can see my PC also is heavy on the screen sharing. I think Android is going to more or less abandon the APK extension and in favor of the Android app bundle, I think. So from the right-click option for properties, you will have the opportunity to change that to AAB, and then just check OK. And probably also make sure that you, not like me, that you also apply for all the configurations that you need. So right now, I think I only did debug or release, one of the two. The third thing I want to say about Xamarin is, and that's not really something I can show you because it's just less errors actually. So if you're working with Android resources, then what we do now is to regenerate the resources designer file, and yeah, basically just eliminate some of the errors that you might have previously. And yeah, I hope that's it about Xamarin. Let me see. The next one is Khalid again with some parts about UX.
Yeah. So yeah, if you can you folks see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So these are like small things. I know Rider and the UI team that works on Rider really prides itself on some of the small things that kind of add up to big quality of life improvements. So on the latest release of Rider, some folks may notice it, some folks may not. But now we have a transparent title bar here at the top. So there actually used to be a line right under here that separated the title bar from the rest of Rider, and now you don't see it. Funny enough, before the call, Martin was like, hey, your instance of Rider looks a little different. What's going on? And I was like, oh, it's the transparent title bar. So you might feel like something is different, but not know what it is exactly. It's likely the transparent title bar. The other thing that's really changed in Rider, and I think people will really notice, people new to Rider will just expect that it just works because you'd expect it to work. But now you can actually drag tabs, and you can actually place them in different places where you want them to be. So this is kind of new, the ability to drag these. You can drag, I think you can drag tool windows as well out and do these kind of things. So it's pretty neat that you can do that now. There's also this dock button, so you can dock things back. But if you use the mouse, if you're not part of the Vim master race that Matt Ellis is part of, using the mouse and dragging windows is really nice. So yeah, that's it for some of the UX UI improvements in Rider. Back to you, Matthias.
Yeah, back to me with my heart. It slips a bit. Let me see. Yes, someone took care of my screen. Thanks for that. So let me see. I actually want to switch to Visual Studio. Yes. So one of the things, and I'm really excited about that, and I hope you will be too. But look at that. So for instance, I have a collection of working days here. And first, what I want to do is select that the hours are greater than 8. So because we want to check for over hours working days, basically. And also here we're using pattern matching. And I think my PC is a bit slow. And just check if it's not Saturday or Sunday. Okay. Now here's one thing. If and I will just tell you, but the working days property will actually throw an exception if you access it for the day of when it's Saturday or Sunday. So I will show you that later. It's not really, and it doesn't make any sense actually. But let's say we want to remove this filtering here, this where call. So before, what you could do was to use structural navigation, and then you select basically the whole range here up until the end, and then you could delete that, right? So I'm personally a bit more accustomed to using expand shrink selection, and that works with Control W. And now now it works a bit differently, because first when you use that, then first it would select this where, and afterwards this part. But in most cases, I guess this was not really, didn't make too much sense, let's say. It was the less popular way people wanted to select their code. But now actually it will first select the whole end range basically, and afterwards it will grow or extend to the full variable initialization. What else? Yeah. And actually, that's also a second thing that I already showed you is structural remove. So in this case, we have a bunch of where calls, and you see I'm actually not selecting the first or the second dot here, but when I press, okay, I didn't properly select, so let's use the proper selection method again. That's something to keep in mind. So if you use the mouse to select that, then it won't work. But if you're using expand shrink selection or structural navigation, then it will remove this extra dot for you, and you're basically done. I think the same should work here with the OR. You see, OR was also removed from that. And also, sorry, Khalid, I couldn't hold it. I still
move him down. He needs to be further down.
Further down?
No, I mean move Khalid further down. He's too high up in that list.
No, I actually wanted to remove him.
Oh man, this is bullying on a corporate / streaming level. I can't take it.
I'm just joking. You're the best.
I'm typing a HR email as we speak. So
let me put you at the top, okay?
All right,
Please don't send anything.
But I really like this. I think it's a key point. I think it's a key point you made though. If you want this structural remove to work, you have to be working semantically to begin with. So you have to use the extend and shrink selection, or it doesn't work, because it doesn't know what kind of semantic selection you've got at the moment to be able to remove stuff correctly. So if you are using a semantic based selection, you get semantic based remove characteristics as well, which is really cool.
So hence either the expand shrink selection or structure navigation. Second thing I want to show you in ReSharper here is Pico style. Oh man, I haven't heard about this style until we prepared the What's New page, but here you can see, or actually let me do this again. So just to also repeat that feature a bit for you, you can actually just select some code, then go to format selection, go here, configure. This dialog will show you only the settings that are meaningful in that context. And now we can actually go here and use the Pico style, and then save as comment, save to an actual settings file, whatever you prefer.
That style is as bad as tabs and spaces, isn't it?
Oh
it's just
my.
like, look at that, just look at that.
You know, Matt, you and I are friends because as soon as we saw Pico style, no offense to anyone who does it, but there was just visible disgust on all our faces.
No offense to anybody who does it, but you're wrong.
Yeah. But it's there. We added it, so it's great.
Also, I have basically the same example in Rider. But in this case, I just want to show you a couple of different things, and that is already in a previous version we kind of unified our visualization for XML doc comments. So this what I used now was quick documentation. I actually also assigned a special shortcut for this. I think, which one is it? I think this one, yeah. But you can also, of course, use the cursor to just show up the tooltip. And the special thing here is now that we have lots more of colorization here. So I think 2 versions ago, we didn't even have colorization for the attributes. Yeah, let me scroll this a bit up also. And you will also see that it will show the proper generic type. In this case. And also for this one, for the list type here, there's also the shortcut or the link to go to the Docs Microsoft website if you care to read a bit about documentation. And I'm not sure if Matt actually mentioned that during the Unity, but Unity also has that for the documentation there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a separate keyboard shortcut to take you directly to the external docs as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually forgot to one for FSharp. Yeah, I forgot to mention FSharp also has this documentation update as well. So if you're using FSharp libraries that are documented, you will get that new style of documentation view.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's it about editor stuff in ReSharper and Rider. Khalid, I switched the order, so now you're up with front-end development.
Yeah. So if you can see my screen, one of the nice things about Rider, and I think Martin alluded to this in the chat, is Rider is part of the IntelliJ IDEA family, which means any work that's happening in other IDEs, if there's any overlap with the workflows in the .NET space, specifically around web development, Rider users get that benefit as well. So here is a React app that's actually running in an ASP.NET Core application. And one of the nice things, if you're using React and you're using hooks, is now, thanks to the WebStorm team, you can actually rename hooks. And as you noticed, it changed the name up here and it changed the name down there. So if you're a big React user, I think you're really going to enjoy that feature. Another feature that folks will really enjoy when they're doing their JavaScript and front-end web development is automatic imports. So here I have a Lambda module that I export, and I'm exporting this Lambda method. And if I go back to my app.js, all I need to do is actually call that method in here. You can see that like the WebStorm tooling inside of Rider found this Lambda method. And if I go ahead and press enter, you'll notice that we actually auto imported the Lambda method as well. So those are some nice quality of life improvements for folks doing web development inside of Rider and maybe focusing more on front-end development, frameworks like React as their UI experience, and letting ASP.NET Core do what it does best, which is back-end APIs. Another nice thing that kind of comes with WebStorm, if you're running your web applications, make sure to go up into your edit configuration. And if you have an ASP.NET Core run configuration, go down here and check this with JavaScript Debugger. You can actually choose which browser, but I usually normally leave it at Chrome. For me, it has some of the better developer tools. But yeah, you can actually come in here and start debugging. And what you'll actually notice, hopefully it does this time, it should spin up a Chrome instance in incognito mode. So right now it's just running my NPM scripts and things are happening. And this is kind of the amazing part of Rider and some of the WebStorm tooling. Don't get dizzy. This is the Rider logo just spinning for you. But one of the amazing things about Rider is it kind of brings in this WebStorm tooling in Rider. So if you're used to the debugging tools over here, you actually don't have to open these things anymore. It's really not necessary. Let me see if I can show you. So this is the index file, but I also have a signup file, which is just a static file. So if I come in here, actually it's in my dub root, which is actually being shown. Oh, so let's see. Hopefully this actually connected. Let me go back into the debugger. It says it's connected. I'm going to go ahead and try to stop and restart it. The curse of screen sharing, I think, is taking place here. But it's building right now. It should kind of hook up into this. So you just saw this flash occur. Okay, let's see if I can get to it. Signup.html. So here's kind of the amazing thing. So go ahead and hide. When I actually click my HTML elements inside of Rider, it's actually highlighting the HTML elements in my Chrome instance. So you can kind of see that occurring. Oh, it was occurring. There it is, right? So in addition to that, I can actually do real-time updates. So I went from a super cool website to a super duper cool website. I can also change some of the colors. So let me find the button here. Maybe I don't like this blue color. Let's go. Let's live dangerously, because Martin likes to live on the edge, like he said earlier. So now our button is red. And some of these things are really neat. You actually have the console window in here. So if I want to actually write console log hello stream, you'll actually notice it showed up in the console in the Chrome instance that we're debugging. So that's kind of one of the nice things that you get when you use Rider for your web development. A lot of the tooling and a lot of the experience that WebStorm users get just comes by default inside of the Rider experience. And some of this debugging experience that the newest version of Rider has is really, really amazing, especially when it comes to debugging and live reloads. If you're actually dealing with a lot of HTML, you don't even have to open the window anymore. If you look at up here, you'll see all the little browser windows, and you'll actually notice the Rider icon. So now you can just click and actually do those modifications in place. So maybe I don't want to live dangerously. Maybe I just want to live on the warning side of things. When I save that, it auto updates inside of Rider. So yeah, that's the new web experience live edit features that are in Rider in the latest release of Rider. So try those out. I think you'll really enjoy them. So yeah, that's it for me.
All right, back to me, and I have a couple of more things coming from IDEA. Resetting my screen. I have a couple more things coming from IDEA, as we already, or did we mention, or did we talk about it? I don't know. But some of you may know Rider always inherits a couple of features from IDEA, which also has a complete team behind it. So this is great. We just earn all the features basically, the same as with WebStorm. And this what I'm going to show you is about VCS integration. And the first for that is let's go here. That's like a very, very minor change. But before that, this changes was named default change set. And if you haven't seen change sets before, this is a really great way to organize all your changes. So for instance, you can create a new change lists. Or I did say a change set, right? So in IDEA, it's change list. And we can just create that, and then we can use various techniques to actually move changes from one change list to another. We can use drag and drop here. We can do it right from inside the file, many actually. But keep in mind, this will be no longer your default change list, but it's called changes.
So quick question about those
yes.
change lists. Are you using them to essentially keep your commits separate and make sure that any change you make to program doesn't get accidentally committed in your default one, or?
Well, I have a couple of use cases for that. So my personal background is also like some of you maybe too, that I use Git extensions on Windows before, and Git extensions has this feature so that you can sorry, I lost it. You can basically stage different lines in a single file, and this is the closest inside Rider or IDEA basically. So you can actually also for a single file. So you see, I have a change here, and I have a change here. I could put this change into a different change set. I'm not sure, can I do it from here? No, but if I go to the actual file, so from here, I could actually move this to the single files change list. And also, I think this is a very great use case for that. And I didn't come up with it by myself, but one of our users told us, or at least me, basically. If you're working with passwords, for instance, then this is a great way to separate the one password. You know, you're debugging something, you just want to leave it there for a while, but you don't actually want to commit it. And that's the first thing I do with secrets that I use. I put them into a separate change list because two change lists cannot be committed together. So you can always only commit one change list, and that prevents you from accidentally sending that secret to public repo, basically.
That's a good tip. Today I learned. Thanks.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of change lists as well, and I use it for a similar sort of purpose. I think it's important to point out that they are different to the Git staging area, but you can also we've also got support for the Git staging area as well. I don't know if you're about to cover that, Matthias, but
yeah,
you can use one or the other. You can't use both, unfortunately.
yeah. Another thing, and that's also good why I mentioned all the change lists is. If you used cherry pick before, I mean, in previous versions, then usually what happened was that it will automatically. Oh no, what did happen? Your local changes. Okay. Okay, what should I do? I'm actually not sure why is it.
I think you triggered the cherry pick.
Yeah, that's also what I wanted, but let me read. Is it because I have just other changes? Actually, I could also just stash them for a moment, or a shelf, basically. So let's do this. have the best messages always. Okay, and I guess the second one too. I think so, but let's try. Is it really because, yeah. Okay, then let's do this too. Shelf those also. I should have tried that. Okay, but let's go back here. And I forgot what I'm going to change. Cherry pick, yeah, right. Now, if you cherry pick before, then what happens usually is that a new change list is created, and it will always be empty in most cases, except you have conflicts or something. And the actual, if you want this old behavior back, you can still do that, because, like, for instance, if you select a bunch of commits, like 10 commits, then you will end up with 10 empty change lists if everything goes as planned. If you want to have the old behavior back, then you can do this there. What else do we have? Yeah, that's a great one. So while I was preparing that, I will also show you SpecFlow in a moment, but I want to show you something very specific, and I think it's here. So I created this project, and I deleted some lines, and then wanted to go back, basically, because I actually deleted this, and then I wasn't sure what again should I insert there if it's not yet implemented, right? And a great way to do this is to use, actually, let's remove it actually for now. And a great way to find out about this is to use local history. So local history, for those that are not yet familiar with it, what it basically does, it's like an automatic continuous version control system. So what it does is every once in a while will save the changes of the files that you're working with. And let's say you deleted some of that code, but you want to go back, but you didn't actually commit something. So now it's lost. You could use the undo stack, right? But undo stack is also, well, rather clunky for this kind of thing. So what you can do is use the local history, because that will keep a change list or a version history of your files. You can also select folders, so you would see many files for a single folder there. Many different options, actually. But what we added here is, usually I would go through, because I have, I did many changes, and maybe I don't find the exact thing where I removed that line. But now I actually can, because I remember it was something with pending, but not exactly sure how the call looked like. Now I can use text search here, and now you see the result set shrink to only the ones that have this pending keyword inside there. And then I could say revert right from here, or I copy it, or however you like. But yeah, revert is probably the best way here. And what the heck? Yes, there it is. I didn't expect it to be full screen, to be honest. Okay, that
local history is awesome.
Say again?
Local history is awesome. It's one of the best features in Rider. It's one of the ones which can absolutely save your butt if you've made a mistake. I've deleted an entire solution once before a demo. I typed the wrong Git. Everyone does it, and I managed to get it all back with local history. It's a lifesaver. It'll save the things that happen in between source control. It's really cool.
Definitely. Also, I think that's worth to mention. Like, sometimes way long time ago, what I did was committing actual commits just as a save point for myself. So what you also can do in local history, and let's see, local history, I think there, you can put a label onto the current state of your solution. That makes it very easy. If you go back to that dialog that I just showed, then you can immediately see, okay, this is where I tried approach 1, let's say. This is where I tried approach 2, and you will never have to actually create branches that get stale or something, or are left on your disk. So this is much easier, I think.
That's cool.
So 3 I explained. One last I have, and that is GPG keys. So the configuration actually takes a bit, but it's not long. So it's the first time I've been using GPG keys and installing all the tools that you need, which are different between Windows, Unix, and Mac, or Linux and Mac. And then you just go here into the version control settings, Git. There you have a configured GPG key. I actually have 2 because I was not smart enough setting that up with a single one right away. Anyway, you can select that here. And from the next time you commit something, your commits are going to be signed, right? So you see this here, which says verified. What you also have to do, of course, is to go into the settings of the hosting service that you use, and the docs that we have for that explain GitHub in space. Yeah, so those 2 you can check. I'm sure our services will have might have that as well. I'm not exactly sure. That's a great way to put this nice little verified badge behind your commit. And that's from me for VCS from IDEA. I think the next one, I'm not exactly sure. Is it plugins, right, Martin?
Let's go with plugins. But actually, before we go into plugins, there's one thing that I wanted to mention, because I don't know. I think we mentioned before that Rider shares a lot of the features with IntelliJ, but also with ReSharper. So a lot of the stuff, if you've been here for the entire 1 hour and 45 minutes already, the stuff that I showed at the beginning in ReSharper also works in Rider, of course. A lot of the formatting stuff that Rachel has been showing also works in ReSharper, because she was demoing this in Rider. So do make sure to check out all of those things in the various tools. And actually, the next thing I'm going to show here, I will show it in ReSharper, but it's also available in Rider. So again, yeah, both tools pretty much support the same thing. So yeah, talking about plugins, both ReSharper as well as Rider have various plugins to do profiling. There's a marketplace with third-party plugins and so on. And actually, one of the plugins that you get in the box with ReSharper and Rider is Dynamic Program Analysis, or DPA. And essentially what it does is continuously profile your application when it's running. I actually have a Sudoku solver here. Source code is probably not that important to look at. But the cool thing is, if I run it, it will actually take the sudoku.txt that I have here and try to fill in the 0 values over the course of the entire program lifetime, and try to actually solve the Sudoku that I created for this tool to solve. And after a couple of million steps, in the end, it will figure out how to solve this Sudoku, I guess. At some point, it's a hard one. Yeah, there we go. So it has been solved in 14 seconds. And you will see at the bottom here that DPA finds some issues in the code that I've written here. But let's say that I did not look at this, and I actually have the solution of this Sudoku here, and I can actually make it easier for my program to solve things and just change a line to the actual solution, run it again, and then see what happens. And ideally, this is not going to take 15 seconds. It's actually virtually instantaneous to solve this Sudoku. Now, DPA, or Dynamic Program Analysis, has been in ReSharper and Rider for a long, long time. But what we've added since, or in the latest release, is the ability to see previous runs. So imagine that I just updated this line and it's actually fast, and I think my code is running pretty well. Because I ran it before with the harder solution, I can actually see that the maximum number of allocations that has been happening during the execution of this application at some point exceeded the threshold that program analysis actually has there. So even if I make it easier on my program, I will still be able to catch those issues that you may not catch otherwise. And actually, I can start optimizing this thing. I know copying cells actually takes quite a while. I can look at this, go in there, look at what DPA is doing, and I know that if I change the type of cell to be a struct. Instead of allocating it on the heap, I can allocate on the stack, but I know that this will actually fix some of the performance issues and some of the memory allocation issues that I have in this application. And once this finishes, you'll actually see that in DPA as well. So there will be fewer messages that are discovered. It's a small thing, but just wanted to show that DPA is there. Definitely give it a try. And yeah, the thing that we just added is essentially that maximum number, so that some issues that may go unnoticed can actually be caught when you see them happening in there. So we optimize things, and we now have fewer errors. With that, let's move on to some other plugins. Actually, I'm going to do a Toolbox commercial again. Toolbox is awesome because it allows you to install all of the JetBrains tools, but you can also install them side by side. And in my case, I have my working Rider where I actually do developments, but now I also installed Rider separately, pointing to an empty directory, so I can get started as if it was a new installation. And you will see the first time, if you're Rider curious, you want to get started with Rider, you will see that you can actually get started with Rider very easily. But Rider will, from now on, also detect the other IDEs that you have installed on your system. So I have Visual Studio on my system, I have code there, I have VS 2022 on there as well, which is still running, which is the warning sign there. But you will see that Rider, just like a web browser, for example, will ask you, do you want to import your key map from Visual Studio? Do you want to import your recent projects? If you have Rider installed, I'd also suggest taking all of those Rider settings and bring them along. And you can get started with Rider using those settings. So I could go with Visual Studio 2022, and actually let's see if that works. Just close it and see what happens. Ideally, at some point, it should show that VS is no longer running. It's still running in the background, I think. Anyway, let's go with the dark theme instead. I can import those settings. And then show you some of the other stuff that we've added here. So in the plugins, you will see that you can always install, like Matthias has this progress bar of the Nyan cats. So you can install custom plugins. We actually have some JetBrains plugins that you can install as well, like the Unity supports. But in the featured plugins, you will see that we actually we looked at the plugin marketplace essentially and found the ones that most people are actually installing. So we wanted to make that easier to discover those. And you will now see that there's IDEA the heap allocations viewer, Xamarin supports, an Azure toolkit that you can install, and the AWS toolkit that you can also install. And I think this is a very nice bridge towards Matthias as well, who's going to talk about the SpecFlow plugin, which is now also featured and that you can install on the go as you install Rider on your system or get started with Rider on your system.
True. Let me bring up my screen. We always click at the same time.
I mean, I can tell you about IdeaVim if anybody's interested. I can
No.
spend the next couple of hours talking about it.
It's like Pico style.
No time. Okay, SpecFlow. So for this, I will make it really short, or rather short, because we had a dedicated webinar for this. So I encourage you to check that out. But very briefly, we have a new plugin available for SpecFlow, so you can install it here from the settings, and there you will see, where is it installed? I always forget to switch to installed. And there you can see SpecFlow for Rider. So the team behind it is really putting a lot of effort into it. Also, this is also maintained and worked on by a member of the community. And basically what it adds is a really nice, I cannot even say basic because it's already very quite a lot. But what it does add is code completion, for instance. So it will see what given steps you have. So you can say, okay, first number is 5, let's say. Then you continue and say, what was, and yeah, I always forget it. But code completion does help here. Let's say 1. And then when the 2 numbers are added, basically, and see, I should use code completion here. 2 numbers are added, then the result should be, what is it, 6, right? If my math works correctly. And from there on, you also have those little icons here that you used to have, also with NUnit, XUnit, etc. You can just go there, run. Actually, what I want to check is if also the shortcut works. Not yet, it seems. But you can run it from here, and then the test should execute. Actually, you already see it's inconclusive. That will not change because I haven't finished the second step. That's where I was coming from before. Remember, with the local history. So in that case, and I only left it for one reason. But let's give it a second to execute the test. I need a new MacBook, I think. Okay, I will just try to already type. The second thing I wanted to show you here is we also have, I think, 2 plugins also for testing. Besides that, the first is FluentValidation, and you can actually tell from the fact that I can use the should template here, so should, and it will all automatically take the result here, and you just tap, and then you could say B, and we also have a result field. Now, actually, I don't want to fool you. It should be the other way around. That will be my word for the FluentValidation. No, sorry, FluentAssertions package. Oh man, so much fluency. And the second I forgot. The second is Verify, actually. Yeah, Verify is also a plugin that we pushed out. But there's also a webinar, so definitely also check that out. I think that's it for the plugins, right? Yeah, Verify, FluentAssertions, and FluentValidation. Definitely check those plugins out. Would be cool also to receive your feedback about this. Last but not least, we have Solution Explorer changes, and I think we switched to Khalid just for one thing. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Wait, yeah.
Yeah. So this applies to anything outside of even web development, but sometimes you have assets in your solution or your project that you just don't want Rider or ReSharper to kind of scan. Maybe they're generated assets. In this example, I'm generating, say, the output. Let's see. So yeah, like there's our node modules folder, or there's a specific app or a specific file. You can actually right click, go to tool. Is it tools? Wait, did I do something wrong? I think you can right click, go to tools, and click stop index. So when you do that, you can see that this file is no longer going to be indexed, meaning you won't see the problems and errors show up. So that's kind of nice, especially if you have a lot of files that ultimately you don't have any control over. You can just kind of opt out of indexing. If you want to get indexing back, you can just go right click, go to tools, and say start index again. So that's a really nice addition to Rider. Yeah, that's it.
And me again for one brief moment. We also added something for the file properties dialog. So here in good old, Simpsons way, writing on the chalkboard. But through the file properties, now you can choose the build action for the file that you selected. Actually, you can also select multiple files to change all of them in one go. And of course, also copy to output, the necessary things here, custom to a namespace. So not a big change, but good to know, I guess. And the last thing I want to show, and I hope that's it then, and one thing I want to mention afterwards is .peak, our decompiler. So, and by the way, this is something just, if you switch from dark theme to the light theme, that sometimes just happens, at least for me. But let's say we want to decompile a single file or how's it called? Single file app There are so many properties for that. Include everything, you know what I mean. If we select one of those files, then we can open them, add them to the decompiler. And this is actually now able to decompile all the things. So we can see we have a couple of native libraries included in that, which would then on at runtime would be unzipped basically, or unarchived, unpackaged. And you can just browse your code as you used to do. So here, for instance, you can see, yeah, this file actually doesn't have any content, I think, so we won't see anything. But just for you to know, you can decompile those apps now. Last thing I want to mention is command line tools. So inspect code, cleanup code, I think as well. Those now have an option which is, I will just write it to you, which is no build. Because usually inspect code was, you know, it's a tool to execute all this analysis stuff and code cleanup on CI. And usually this tool required you to first restore all the NuGet packages so that it can properly analyze your solution. Now it will do this by default, but if you still choose to, you know, not restore, not build, etc., then you just can pass this argument to the invocation. And I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. I want to thank everyone here, our advocates. Well done, everyone. Proud of you. Last thing we want to give a brief moment here is also our roadmap for the following version. So for ReSharper and Rider. Just we will go very quickly through for the 0.3 release later this year. We will, of course, continue working on Visual Studio 2022. We will have C# 10 support, or at least work on it. And just one thing before I forget it, this is not actually what we promised to deliver. Yeah, they're you know how it goes. You have plans, but sometimes they might not work out. C# 10 support, I'm pretty confident about that, but just regarding some of the others. And actually, I think we had a question regarding C# 10 support. So over the course of our EAP, we'll definitely see something pop up. Also, we will have grammar checking. We're looking forward to implement that, which will work as a that sounds really interesting because it's a JVM process next beside ReSharper, right? If I remember correctly. Blazor support, we have yeah. Say again.
It's the inverse of Rider indeed.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually checking if I did read correctly. But yeah,
IDE, it's microservices for IDEs. That's what it is.
Also, for Blazor, we will just look out for whatever will pop up. I know .NET 6 is definitely on the list to add dedicated support for. Predictive debugger, I think that might even arrive, or at least I know the engine behind that is now ready. So we're looking or investigating the UX, UI options, etc. We're also looking at a link visualizer. So if you're coming from IDEA, for instance, we have a similar view for Java data streams. For entity framework, and I think in this case it's core, we're looking at some inspections for the N+1 problem. So to make you aware that you might miss some include statements. And also schema validation and even diagrams about schemas, if I'm not mistaken. CQRS compliance. So for that, that actually came from the community. I mean, the issue with the request, and we're starting to slowly start with a couple of things. So I think the first thing we want to start with is an inspection that makes sure that one command doesn't directly call another command. And for .peak, it's support for all the new for all the new C# or .NET things, basically, which I think involves native ins, async, was it async disposable, records, and all that stuff. For Rider, the list is a bit longer even, at least it looks like. But again, here .NET 6 support and C# 10. Also, you know, Windows 11 and macOS Monterey, I think it's called. Is that right? They're just at the door, basically. And we will make
Monterey.
Monterey, okay.
Yeah.
And we will make sure that those work smoothly. Same as with Apple M1 support. So there is, if you don't know yet, there is a build available for that, but it's not, you know, not integrated into Toolbox yet. Same as with Rider for Unreal. But there is something, and you can check this out and let us know. What do you think? Code with Me also is very high on our priority list, and fingers crossed that we might even see a plugin over the rest of the year. Let's see. Everyone cross your fingers. A new debugger UI, so that's also in the works for some time, and I think it originates from changes in IDEA, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I already saw it, and it looks cool, definitely. So I'm looking forward to that. Multiple startup projects. So this is, you might already know, and I think we even mentioned it. You can have compound configurations, which would basically start different projects. But this is also to allow you to run one project and debug the other. So that wasn't available until now, and we're looking forward to bring that as well. Problems view is something that will arrive with one of the first EAPs. So that is, in principle, it's also inherited from IDEA, but we need to add a few things to work in Rider. It's basically just another view for stuff like these errors and solutions view, for instance. So it's like a central view for all different kinds of messages and problems that might be in your solution, or that are present in your solution. For Windows Docker containers, I think that will also arrive in one of the first EAPs. We added debugging. FSharp support, I think I mentioned that already. We're looking for something with curried functions, postfix templates. I don't remember exactly, but we actually will also release the blog post about that, so keep an eye out for that. MAUI, as everyone, we will keep an eye on it and see what needs to be done, and hopefully we also deliver in that case. UWP debugging should also arrive pretty soon. And for Unreal, I think we're looking at improving support for Perforce, and also running on Linux, on Linux as an operating system. And Matt, I think you need to take over Unity, because I don't remember.
Yeah, so the other thing with Unreal as well is looking towards integrating it with the release. We need to start releasing it at some point, getting it out of preview. Whether that's going to be this release or the next release or whatever, but we're looking at that. A Unity, a couple of improvements to the UI toolkit support, so some things with the USS and UXML file types. We're going to make sure that we show the right syntax highlighting when looking at source code from Unity packages, third-party packages, and also we're going to start processing external packages for asset usages, which is going to improve the sort of the existing code vision links we've got to tell you where your code is being used in other assets and so on there. So it sort of makes those links work a whole lot better with extra packages.
All right, thanks. And definitely, I mentioned it already, we will release dedicated blog posts for both of the roadmaps, where you can actually also read how the confidence is, and then for some that are already merged when they arrive, etc. So keep an eye out for that. And with that said, I need to go to the next slide. For more information, you can visit our blog. You can follow us on Twitter. Make sure to follow everyone. Oh, I should have removed this probably. So it's not.
We are professionals. We are professionals.
Let's just hold your hand up at the bottom of the screen. There you are.
Yeah, I'm actually doing it already. So anyway, follow us all on Twitter. If you have any questions, let us know there. We have webinars every once in a while. Check those out, and yeah, just check out on us. And with that said, thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. If you did, then let us know by subscribing and liking that content, no matter on which channel you are, if it's JetBrains TV or the .NET Foundation. Also, thanks to the .NET Foundation for actually hosting us. And yeah, I guess we will see us in this format another time this year, I hope. And thanks to all my colleagues, Martin, Khalid, Rachel, and Matt. And thanks to you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well done on wearing your hat this long.
Yeah, I'm afraid of taking it off, but I will in a moment, and you can see what's underneath.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.